Hey everybody, welcome back to Gaiman Collectibles. We're here with another recent reads video, and this time we're going to talk about Neil Gaiman's Sandman. So, man, I just got done reading Sandman. We got a lot to talk about. I'm not going to get into any spoilers because like with Hellboy, I don't think it's a book that many people have read, although there is a big cult following, but I don't want to ruin it for anybody who's thinking about getting into the book. What we have here are the Absolute editions. There are 5 volumes and a spin-off, Death Absolute edition. The main story is only in the first 4 volumes, and you could also collect the main story in 2 thick omnibus. I went for the Absolute editions because I wanted to have all of the content. I didn't want to know that there was some bonus material out there, and we'll talk about what's collected in there when we get to it. And the Death book. So, you know, you could go trade paperback routes, and I would recommend to do that before just diving into this without knowing anything about the story. I like to consider myself a versatile reader. I can enjoy a complex story that really makes you think, that's not very action heavy like Sandman, and then I could turn around and read Deadpool by Joe Kelly or Uncanny X-Force by Rick Remender. But that being said, this book is not for everyone. A lot of people will tell you how much they loved it, and I did as well, but it's definitely not for everyone. It is a little dense, it's a little bit out there, and it could be a little bit hard to follow at times. So, The Sandman was published under DC, and then later on in the series, DC's Vertigo title. It's not the first time the Sandman character was introduced into comics. It was Neil Gaiman was approached to do the book Sandman, and some of the prerequisites were that it would be a brand new Sandman, and characters that were in this Sandman universe wouldn't be used in other DC comics because, it is part of the DC universe, but it's its own little niche. So, who is Sandman? Sandman is one of the Endless. So you have 7 Endless. I hope I don't get this wrong. You have Sandman, which is Dream. You have his siblings, Death, Delirium, Despair, Destruction, Destiny. I lost it. Dream, Death, Despair, Delirium, Destruction, Destiny. Damn, I can't believe I'm forgetting the last one. Anyway, he's not a superhero. He's not a god. He's an idea. He's the physical personification of the King of Dreams. And the dream realm, like when you go to sleep and you're in a dream, that's his realm. The Absolutes are one of the best constructed Absolute editions out there. They're just very impressive books. The Dream, he's also known as Morpheus, is one of his names. The first Absolute edition is basically issues 1 through 20. And the Sandman, basically where it starts out is that he's been captured. Some humans attempted to capture his sister, Death, so that there would be no more death and that people could live forever. But they capture him on accident. And he's captured for like 70 years. The people who capture him pass away from natural causes. And then he's being held by their children. And eventually he escapes. But Morpheus is basically a... it looks like a Johnny Depp character. Like a very pale, very dark, tall, thin, long black hair, always wearing black character. When he first breaks out, he needs 3 items in order to take over his realm, which has been abandoned, and the dream world is all fucked up, right? So he needs a couple of things. I think it's a pouch of sand, which you know how Sandman in the old stories that he rubs sand on your eyes and you fall asleep. He needs that. He needs his crazy anteater looking gas mask and some kind of gem. So a lot of cool stuff. The first issues in this whole volume, it plays out more like a horror kind of comic. And then it gets a little bit tame and becomes more of like a sci-fi, not a sci-fi, more of a fantasy type of book. Once he, once we get past the hunt of his items and him going, back to his realm, the Sandman books turn very much into side stories and other characters and what happens in their lives and happens with dreams. This is, I think, the first issue that has death. It's really pissing me off that I can't think of all the characters now. You got Dream, Death, Delirium is the crazy one, Despair is the naked fat one. Desire, Destruction, and Destiny. That's what I missed. So, yeah, the family is they're called the Endless. Oh, yeah, there goes his mask. They're not really gods. They're like I said, they're more of ideas. There's reoccurring characters within the dream realm, like you have his raven, Matthew, which he goes through different ravens and they leave for whatever reason. Here's the slipcover for Absolute Volume 2. This was a book that actually I read Volume 1 last year, and I was like, man, that was a little too much for me. Let me go ahead and read something else. I think I got actually midway to this second volume. Is that death? Midway to the second volume last year, and I put it down. And I picked it back up recently, maybe a couple weeks ago, and I just got into it and I started reading it. So it's not a hero book, it's not a superhero spandex book. It's a fantasy book, man. It has to deal with dreams, and there's a lot of stuff that's really out there. And it was really groundbreaking stuff because this was done in the early 90s. So you got to think about what was going on during that time. Extreme 90s era. Look at this shit with the baby. It's sick, man. Extreme 90s is happening. You know what I mean? Liefeld's happening. McFarlane's happening. And then you got this. It's not really an artist-driven book. It's more of a writer-driven book. There goes Morpheus. This storyline I didn't care for as much with this whole princess. And I think I kind of dragged on a little too long. But it's cool, man. It's like, it plays with the idea of a place that you go to in your dreams that during the dream it's familiar, but when you wake up and you think about it, you're like, you've never been to that place before. And it's crazy. Like, he'll end that world for them, and then they'll be standing in a desert, and then it zooms out, and they're standing in a pile of sand in his hands. It's really freaky shit, man. So the first volume deals with, him coming back and getting all his shit back. The second one starts introducing these side characters. The third volume, let me see. What does it start doing? Yeah, it's issues 40 through 56. Yeah, it's basically just issues 1 through 75 of Sandman. It's not like all these little side things. Cain and Abel, which that's Cain right there, are, characters within the dreaming, which is, like I said, his realm. Is this where we talk? Yeah, this volume 3 has my favorite story. I don't want to give you a spoiler page, but it has to deal with Morpheus' son, which is Orpheus. And I think the plot was taken from Greek mythology because it even has him going to Hades and stuff. I don't want to give anything away. But this is him, very small on the bottom with Hades and his wife very big in the chairs. And man, there's some scenes in his storyline that I was like, damn. Really, some really deep stuff, man. One scene in particular, I don't really want to get into it because of spoilers, but they could make a Disney movie out of that storyline. Here goes Despair. That she's always fat and naked, disgusting looking thing. but she thrives on despair. She sits in her realm and she watches people at the brink of despair. It reminds me of if you watch Spider-Man Homecoming, the MJ character sits in detention, not because she has detention, because she likes to draw people at their worst or whatever. That's kind of like a despair's kind of thing. What is this? That's gross. This lady throwing up. I forget what this storyline is, man. Oh, okay, yeah, so Delirium and Dream go on a quest. Delirium is just crazy, man. She's like batshit. Like, even her words, the word bubbles are like all rainbow colors, and she doesn't really make much sense. She's kind of like a child. You have the mind of a child. It was a cool storyline. It all ties in at the end. So let me see, where does this volume end? Oh, this one has like the Ramadan short story, which is like Arabian type of setting, but it's really cool, man. This guy is like a Jafar type of character, and he basically tries to strike a deal with Dream by blackmailing him or something. But it's a good book. I don't want to give any spoilers. All right, then you have this storyline, which is pretty cool, which basically these people crash in a car, and the girl's in bad shape. The guy's okay. He drags her to this inn, but there's like a minotaur in there, and it's like a bunch of people that got lost in the brink of dying and dreaming, and they're in this place telling stories, and it's pretty cool stuff. But, you know, again, they become a lot of short stories, so they don't have to really deal as much with the overall story with Morpheus, but it does all tie in at the end. Especially the end of that particular storyline really ties up nicely at the end of the main story. I think here goes Desire, which is like a guy and a girl at the same time. It's weird. Has to deal with people's desires, right? Yeah, here's the Endless right here, drawn kind of cartoony. The bonus material is cool. It shows a lot of stuff that I didn't even realize that there was such a big following for this, man. Like a lot of Randy Bowen statues in the back and promotional materials. So, Volume 4 ends the main story. And they do a really good job of it. I really can't talk about much of it without spoiling it, man. I don't know. It's hard to say. Here's a different type of art style. More pastel looking. I like the art throughout this book. I like that it changes. This story has a lot to do with this little baby, which gets lost. And it really traumatizes the hell out of the mother, as you could imagine. What else could I say without giving anything away? This villain comes back. I think his name is Cornanthian. That he's a demon. That he has mouths for eyes. He doesn't play a really big role in the first Absolute. He's like a antagonist, and in the last one he's not. And it kind of has to deal with. He was created by Dream, and Dream will just create another one. And even his like little subordinates will ask him like, "Why would you create this guy?" He's like, "Hey, why not?" You know. He's not really worried. It's not really a threat to him. Is what you kind of find out. So here's some cool stuff. So I think Sandman, I definitely like it. Again, I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. It depends on what kind of stuff you're into. If you're a versatile reader like myself, give it a shot. You know, maybe you don't want to go ahead and drop on all 6 omnibus, and there's a prequel omnibus, Absolute, coming out next year, I believe. Yeah, this gets into spoiler stuff that I don't want to get into. You know, it's hard for me to even say, man, we get the first trade paperback to give it a shot because it's not the same type of story throughout. maybe hopefully the way I described it can give you kind of an idea of what you'd be getting yourself into. But it's a critically acclaimed book, and it is for a reason, So I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely think you should check it out. But again, it's not for everyone. Volume 5 takes place after, it's not even after the story. It's not part of the main story. So what happens here, the first story you get in here, actually it's called The Last Sandman Story, which is kind of like more of a novel type of breakdown. And the second story is a novel called The Dream Hunters. And when I was reading it, I thought that, I don't really want to read a novel. I mean, there's one page of art with one page of text, then a full panel. Great art, though. But I started reading the novel, and I couldn't put it down. I read the whole shit in one sitting. And I didn't even know, because I didn't look at the table of contents, but I'm glad I didn't, because at the end, the last story is that same story in comic book form. So I'm reading it, and I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. And I'm like, oh shit, it's the same story, but they made it into a comic. And I like both of them. I like the comic more knowing the original story. And it wasn't that short of a story. So the Dream Hunters is pages 18 through 145. And then the comic is 351 through 475. So a good amount of pages that deal with that. Oh shit, and then what's after that? But it's a really good story. It's just like, I don't know if you want to call it a side story. It's a side story for sure. It doesn't really have much to do with Dream at all. And that's where like a lot of this stuff is. A lot of it doesn't really have to do with Dream or the Sandman, but he has sprinkled in the story here or there. Then you get a short story called Endless Nights, and then you get 7 chapters that each deal with one of the endless. Chapter 1 is death, Chapter 2 is desire, Chapter 3 is dream, Chapter 4 is despair, Chapter 5 is delirium, Chapter 6 is destruction, and Chapter 7 is destiny. Delirium used to be something else before she was delirium. Can't remember. She's more known for being delirium, trust me. So those little chapters, what are those? Little one-shots, I think. Yeah, and some of them are replayed, reprinted in... so Death's chapter is reprinted in here. There's 3 issues that are reprinted in the Death, in the Absolute Death. Look at the art on here. Pretty cool stuff, man. So, I see a lot of people getting just the 4 volumes, but I think, you might as well get the 5th volume. It just adds to the world, and I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. All right, now let's talk about Absolute Death. So, this is Sandman. All has to deal with Dream. Death is, one of his sisters. I like Death, man. She was more likable than Dream. She was cool, she was nice, she loves everybody. Her view on death is like, what's the problem? You're born, you die, it's the same thing. One thing is not worse than the other. It just is what it is. It's not a sad thing, So, I like her character, man. She was cool. So, the thing about Absolute Death is that there's 3 stories out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8... 9, 10. Out of 10 stories, 3 are reprinted from here. The first 2 stories is basically Sandman issue 8 and issue 20. And then Death in Venice is the story from the 5th Absolute Edition of Sandman. But, so basically what you're getting here are 2 3-chapter death stories. The High Cost of Living and The Time of Your Life, which is really cool, man. It has to do with like this lesbian couple, and one of them becomes a rock star named Foxglove, and I don't really want to give out spoilers on the whole Foxglove stuff. Yeah, this was reprinted from Sandman. Yeah, well, about and those two stories or three chapters each, they tie into each other, so they're kind of like they run consecutively. So it's cool. It really, that story is more of death. Once a century comes and lives as a human being for a day to understand life in order to perform her function as death. And actually, you know what? So this was another interesting thing at the end. There's a short comic book. It's only a couple of pages. It's called, I don't know, it's like a PSA for AIDS. And I was like, man, this is so 90s, right? Because AIDS was a huge epidemic in the early 90s. And for a comic book, it was published in like 91 or 93. They did a good job of like this cool hip girl explaining to the readers about the dangers of AIDS, HIV, practicing safe sex, not sharing needles. And I was like, damn, I'm gonna have my 13-year-old daughter read this shit, man, because coming from her, it's like a lot better than coming from her dad, you know? So she's even putting a condom on a banana. But I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool of them, man. And at that point, it's at the end of the book. You already kind of really are invested in the character of Death, and you really like her. I'm like, damn, I'm gonna give my daughter this whole book to read, man. So I am happy that I got this book. I didn't really look at pricing on stuff. If you're on a budget, these might not be the way to go because the cover price, it was $100 for this one. So in stock trades, you could get it for $50. But then you're only really getting a handful of issues that you haven't already had in the Sandman books. But yeah, man, that's pretty much it. So I feel what's the word I was looking for? A good sense of fulfillment that I finished reading all this. I love the stories. I love the characters. I can't wait for the prequel. I guess it's like an Absolute Sandman Zero. I don't think it's a very thick book, but I'm going to have to add it to the collection. I definitely like the books. Let me know what you guys think about Sandman in the comments. If you have read it, if you haven't read it, if you have any other questions that I didn't really touch on. Again, read at your own risk. It might not be the book for you, but it was definitely for me. And if I liked it, I think almost anyone could get into it. But that's going to be it. I'm going to wrap it up for this recent reads. Thanks for joining in, and check me out next time. Peace.